Over the past several weeks, I've presented numerous evidence for the truthfulness of the Bible, the existence of God, and how God is the creator and there's none else besides God. Things didn't happen by chance, but they happened by a purpose. Just like this phone did not happen by accident, but it happened for a purpose, designed and conceived by an intelligent designer. With all that said, how do you trust that the central figure of the Bible, at least for us, me as a Christian, Jesus of Nazareth, Yeshua, the Messiah, Mashiach, Christ, how do we know, how do I know, how do you know that he is who he says he is? There's many ways to know that. You have the internal evidence of the Bible, and you have the external evidence of history that confirms the same thing. You also have Bible prophecies, and you may say, well, those things were written by man, blah, blah, blah. But hear me out. Let's say that these prophecies were just written by man. Man came up with these things on their own. There was no God. There's no godly influence on them. They didn't write these books of the Bible, the Old Testament, under the Holy Spirit. They were not influenced whatsoever by God. These were stories made up by man. God did not influence them whatsoever. Let's assume that. You could say that somebody wrote those prophecies into the Old Testament to coincide with the life that Jesus lived. The Jews that lived abroad, away from Israel, in the Greek world of the time, they wrote the Old Testament that was written in Hebrew and Aramaic. They wrote that book, those books, that Old Testament, or in Hebrew the Tanakh. They wrote it in Greek, and they call it the Septuagint. And we know by historical data that the Septuagint was finished and was completed in 250 BC. That's historical. You can go and you can check it out for yourself. There's about 300 messianic prophecies in the Bible. There's some that are extremely specific, but there's about 300 of them. I'm just going to go over a few quick ones. The first one that I'm going to start with is in Genesis 3:15, and it says the following. And God is speaking to the serpent, and it says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and he shall bruise him on the heel. Well, how is this a prophecy concerning the Messiah? You go through the whole of the Old Testament, the whole Bible, and it always speaks, the Bible always speaks of the seed of the man, never the seed of the woman. In this case, God was being very specific. He was speaking of the seed of the woman. Jesus was born of a woman. He did not have an earthly father. The Messiah would be born of a virgin. Isaiah 7:14. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel. Emmanuel is Hebrew for God is with us. Here's one of the most important. They're all important, but this prophecy is so specific to the minute detail. And it's the passage in Daniel 9:24-27. It says, 70 weeks, 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince, and here's one of the rare occasions, I think there's only 2 instances where the exact word Messiah is spoken. And Messiah, Mashiach in Hebrew, means anointed one. Until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and its end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war, desolations are determined. And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. Now here is going into the second coming of Jesus. So I'm not going to go into that right now. But right here, if you count, and this is a historical event. If you Google, and if you Google when the decree was given, I think was King Earthship. I can't pronounce it. I didn't write that down. I used to remember it. There was a king of Persia or king of Babylon. I can't remember which. He gave a decree. King Xerxes. I can't say it. But he gave a decree that the Jewish people that had been taken into captivity, that they could return to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls. That's a historical event. That happened. That's been recorded, and you can Google it, and you can see the writing of the recording. And when that decree came forth, that the people could go back and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, there would be a certain amount of weeks, of years. Now, if you count all those years that they were decreed until the Messiah would come, it falls exactly when Jesus was born. Not decades before, not decades later, or centuries. Exactly around the time that Jesus was born. The Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, Micah 5:2. But as for you, Bethlehem Ephratah, and it's specific because at that time there were other Bethlehems. So it specified exactly which one. Too little to be among the clans of Judah. From you one will go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. Jesus was pierced, and his garments divided. Psalm 22:16-18. For dogs have surrounded me, a band of evildoers has encompassed me. They pierce my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They look, they stare at me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Zechariah 12:10. I will pour out on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplication, so that they will look on me whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only son, and they will weep bitterly over him like the bitter weeping over a firstborn. There's much more that can be said. There's, like I said, 300 prophecies, some so specific, like where he was going to be born, from what family, from what specific descendant, when exactly he was going to be born, that they would take his garments and cast lots for these garments. So many prophecies that he had no control over, all this information that we have. If you don't believe, as I've stated before, it's not because you don't want to believe. It's not because you can't believe. It's because your heart has denied God's truth. And your heart is hard. But you can still change. There's still time. As long as you have a heartbeat, you can change. God is knocking. I cannot change you. I could speak to you every day from now till eternity. And I cannot make you change. That change comes from you. Let me leave you with Isaiah 53, written a few hundred years before Jesus was born. Who has believed our message? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of parched ground. He has no stately form or majesty, that we should look upon him, nor appearance that we should be attracted to him. He was despised and forsaken of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And like one from whom men hide their face, he was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely our griefs he himself bore, and our sorrows he carried. Yet we ourselves esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was pierced through for our transgressions, and he was crushed for our iniquities. The chastening for our well-being fell upon him, and by his scourging we are healed. All of us, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way. But the Lord has caused the iniquity of us all to fall on him. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that is silent before his shearers, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, for the transgression of my people, to whom the stroke was due. His grave was assigned with the wicked man, yet he was with a rich man in his death, because he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth. But the Lord was pleased to crush him, putting him to grief. If he would render himself as a guilt offering, he will see his offspring. He will prolong his days, and the good pleasure of the Lord will prosper in his hand. As a result of the anguish of his soul, you will see it and be satisfied. By his knowledge the righteous one, my servant, will justify the many, and he will bear iniquities.